Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown here with my reoccurring banter buddy, Sabby Reyes Kulkarni.
Hello, Professor JB is back, along with I, the night janitor at the Museum of Media Studies.
And Sabby, I, I want to start with the NFL draft. And I want to start with this remarkable moment that our viewers can see on the screen shortly.
I went to school in Michigan for 2 years. Guess where I got this from, though? I'm saying you gotta guess. You're gonna be wrong though, but guess. Nah. Macy's. What you mean? They be on sale on the rack, all the colors. Look, $79, $89. Nice little deal. You get the trench coat for like $100. Nice little. I'll take it up personally. I might go get some more colors. I need a blue one and another red. See, I ain't know nothing about Thanksgiving. I shop like my mom. I get my coats in the summertime. You gotta shop a season or two before, just in case, and they be cheaper. Cause you go at Thanksgiving, everybody in Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying?
He's right.
Who's going with? Oh, we could go. Oh, my bad. Hold up. Y'all can hear me? This on or this off? All right, bro. Nah, man, you forgot what the school in Michigan?
Yeah, that's
this guy. I like this guy, man.
Yeah, that's Keon Coleman, the newest Buffalo Bill wide receiver.
Dude, we're in good hands. This is great. I like this dude already. Like, he completely won me over. By the way, he's right about shopping ahead. That dude is oozing with personality. Hopefully, the talent on the fields.
Oozing with personality.
If they select,
yeah.
What round did they select him in?
First pick of the second round.
Okay, so they think he's got something.
Absolutely. A lot of people projected him as a late first round pick. Uber talented guy, uber confident guy.
He's charming, man. He's going to be fun in those press conferences.
Yeah.
They'll probably try to reel him in.
I just hope he's good.
I hope so too. And you don't think Josh is going to love this guy? Like right off the bat?
Josh handpicked this guy.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. He was Josh's favorite of the wide receivers. Yeah.
Listen, sometimes a door closes and a window opens, or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
Or what I said once watching a movie. It was actually a black dramedy. I don't remember the name of it, but this kid falls for this girl. He's a kid. He's like, I don't know, 11. And she like strings him along. And then this older girl comes along and the one girl rejects him. This older girl comes along. And I turned to my friend and said, wow, he lost a nickel and found a silver dollar. So maybe that's what just happened here with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, quite possibly. Lost a nickel and won a found a silver dollar. Can't say it. So I wanted to ask you about the NFL draft. Did you watch any?
No, I didn't realize you were as into it as you are.
Yeah.
Michael Smith, who I'm a fan of, he has said in the past his family knows not to bother him because the NFL draft is more important to him than Christmas.
I wouldn't go that far.
I know you wouldn't, but that's pretty hardcore.
Yeah. I watched a good 8-9 hours of it.
Okay, that's more than the average, except you got some ratings.
Yeah. Right? First night got 12 million viewers. 12 million views. And in this era, that is gigantic.
What is the most the NFL draft has like at its peak?
It's in that range.
But that used to mean less than it does now, right? Is what you're saying?
No. It's only hit that level in this era.
Okay.
4 or 5 maybe 10 years.
Because it was not a big marquee draw before, right? Am I understanding that?
Yeah, on a couple of levels, it was simpler. I remember watching the entire draft as a back when it was on Saturdays. It would start at noon
Hmm.
and it would run to like 7 o'clock, and you'd go through all 7 rounds.
Oh, yeah.
And
They weren't trying to squeeze as much juice
yeah,
out of it.
and then they slid it into the afternoon, further in the afternoon. I think it would start at like 3, and it will go to like 11, and then eventually they decided we're going to go a 3-day extravaganza. So we start on Thursday night, which the first rounders were. Second, Saturday on Friday would be second and third round, where Mr. Coleman was drafted, and on no on Friday it would be the second and third round, and then on Saturday would be the 4th through 7th round. So they blew it out and they made it an extravaganza and this sort of larger sort of festival of football, which I find really interesting. So they also took it on the road. So it used to be at Radio City Music Hall, and it was there for a couple decades.
I didn't even know that.
After that, they decided to go on the road. They took it to Chicago. They've taken it to Vegas. They've taken
They
it to
should.
Philly, Nashville, and
Why?
this.
Why shouldn't they? I mean, they should do like that. Makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense actually to do that.
yeah. You go from having something like 10,000 people in Radio City Music Hall. I don't know the capacity off the top of my head, but something like that, maybe 20,000. I think it might actually be less than that. If I
It's
remember,
not that big. It's not. It's
yeah,
not. It's. I don't know if it's. It might be a little over 10, but it's a pretty compact place.
to back in Detroit this weekend, you had 700,000 people show up over the course of 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah. The biggest night was, of course, night one, where they got something like 275,000 people in the mall
Jesus.
just to watch people hand out draft picks.
Jeez. I mean, looks like the NFL can fart in an empty like red beer cup, and people will watch that.
Well, yeah. Look. I think it's America's passion.
Sure is.
It is this sort of we will. I mean, the schedule release of the NFL is an event.
Mhm.
The NFL Combine, literally watching guys in their underwear run, is a straight up event. It is craziness. It's insanity. And it's pretty much farting in a red cup. Is there any event on television where you can imagine yourself watching 8 hours of?
No.
Flat no.
I mean, you mean like network style like a live telecast?
Live TV that you had to stick through for that long.
I
What's the
mean,
longest that you could do it?
I don't know if we were rewinding the clock and Lollapalooza, the when it was traveling,
Mm-hmm.
was on TV for the whole day. If they picked a day and like broadcast one of the shows, I probably could have watched that. But that's about it. That's the only thing I could think of. I can't think of anything else that would grab my interest for that long.
So live music?
Yeah, and even that now would be a stretch for me. But when I was 18, I would have sat.
So you couldn't handle like a Coachella stream? I know that was streaming a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I wouldn't do very long of that. I would do maybe 1 or 2 sets, and I still don't even tune into Coachella.
And this is something that I've been meaning to ask you over the last few weeks. What do you make of something like a massive concert like Coachella these days? Is it? I feel personally that these events have diminished. They feel like less important. It feel like there was a certain point where you were a festival lead act, and that meant something. And
Hmm.
now it doesn't feel like it means as much, at least to me. Maybe I'm just getting old.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to definitively state. I don't really have my hand on the pulse of that. Strangely enough, because Lollapalooza begat all these other ones,
Mhm.
and then the landscape just got really saturated. There's like tons of them, and I like the idea of a lot of festivals. I hope festivals survive, but I think they have almost become a little more homey. Like there's the big ones, right? That and that are still, for lack of a better term, name brands. But there's a lot of like festivals, regional ones that draw big acts that you don't really hear too much buzz about.
Mhm.
And I think those are great, and I hope those survive. I think the thing is, those things got like commodified right away. Like even from the first Lollapalooza. So I was drawn into watching old clips because I just interviewed the former frontwoman from the band Lush, and they played the second Lollapalooza. They were the first on at the second Lollapalooza, and I went to the first four, and then the seventh one,
Wow.
and then so yeah, so and it was I was 18 when I went to the first one, and it was a big deal. I mean, it was life changing. But I mean, those events. I mean, even when you get to like Woodstock '94, they're not meant for people's comfort. I mean, you you're gonna spend a lot of fucking money on water, and you're gonna be very uncomfortable in the sun all day or for multiple days, or the mud, rain or shine, fuck you, and you're gonna get fleeced for money, and you know, hopefully you go prepared, you know. So it's like music festivals are awesome, but those like Coachella, you're out in the desert. It's an undertaking, and if you don't do it right, you can have a miserable time.
All right. I have 2 questions here.
Did I
And I
answer your
know
question? I mean, I like
yeah.
didn't want to
No worries, but you inspired a couple more.
like Bonnaroo. Like I think that is a big deal, but like again, it's like it's like hundreds of thousands of people
Mhm.
in these spaces that are like there's nothing there. They fit hundreds of thousands of people because there's nothing there, which means if it's sunny, you're just baking for like days on end in the sun, which is not good. The first several times I went to Lollapalooza, I had the endurance to watch 7 or 8 bands in a row, even bands that I didn't necessarily like. I could do that. I could soak all that in, and it was awesome. But like, did this need to get bigger and bigger and bigger? Can it get smaller? The last festival I think I went to, besides Jazz Fest here, which I have thoughts about that too, was Ottawa Blues Festival, and Wilco played, and it was awesome. It was like, but that's in a city. People come and go. You know what I mean? You're not trapped there.
All right. There are like 4 different things you said I'd
Yes.
like to go directions, but I'll take my 2 strongest reactions. How did Lollapalooza change your life?
Well, I saw the Rollins band at 1 p.m. in 90-degree heat, and I've never seen a band play that hard. Like their fucking lives depended on it, and it was really just to see that at that age. And then Jane's Addiction closed it, and then in between, you had 9 Inch Nails, who I did not go there thinking I would be a fan of, so I walked out a convert. You had Living Color on the bill. You had Ice T and Body Count, Living Color on the bill, and I've seen Living Color is the band I've seen the most. It just so happens that way. I love them, but it just I've seen them a bunch of times. And then Jane's Addiction, who, in my view, are the most transcendent live experience I've ever had. I was lucky. I saw them 5 times back in the day, and I won't see them now. I would. You could put $5,000 on the table. I wouldn't go.
Wow. Hell of a bill.
Yeah, it was really, really. I mean, it was just a lot of music, and a lot of those bands made a big impact on me. I mean,
And my other question was about Lush.
mhm.
How's the interview? How'd it go?
Well, it was 2 hours and 40 minutes long, so that gives you
Woo!
an indication that it must have done something right.
She must have liked you.
She tweeted and said it was a lovely chat, which it
Wow.
was.
Are you posting that?
I posted it. I posted the main, and then I started with the shorts, and then I'm going to post. So I have shorts, and then I call the other ones chunks, shorts
Yeah.
and chunks, and I'm getting to the chunks.
What did you talk about? Everything?
We talked about parenthood. She's got a new book. Her dad was a serious, I mean, by his own description, serious like pussy chaser. I mean, she even she used the word pussy, like in quoting him. She had like a pretty shocking upbringing, like that by our standards would be people would find that her upbringing borderline abusive, or there was but she has a slightly, her tone is not one of like victimhood surrounding that. She has a way of wearing it. So we talked about parenthood. We talked about the 90s, obviously, and drugs and celebrity and a lot of stuff. She's super chatty, awesome, charming person. So
Interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing it. That's awesome.
yeah, and I just last night edited my I interviewed the bassist Scott Schreiner from Weezer and Rivers Cuomo in person in 2014, so almost 10 years ago, and I just dusted those off, and I'm doing a paying subscribers only post on
Dope.
Substack.
Dope. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how you should do it. Got a nice carrot.
Right. And my David Crosby, I'm going to do something similar with that. I don't have enough people yet to like, but now I'm going to start dangling those carrots. So, yeah.
Yeah. As Ethan Sherwood Strauss, who we both like, you more than I.
I'm a paying subscriber.
Yeah, we both like him.
Mm-hmm.
As he called it, one for me and one for them.
I like that. I like that.
So one paid, one free. One paid, one free.
I like that. I like that. And I'm going to post excerpts on YouTube, and there's a whole story to go with the Weezer thing. so I tell the story on YouTube, and then for the non-paying subscribers too. The other thing is the drummer from Lush committed suicide in '96. He hanged himself, and so that pulled the plug on the band, and so we talked about that as well. But so I was going through all these old videos, and like it was like stirring up so much.
I bet. I would like to make a pivot.
Sure, please.
Let's get anyone who sees the title of this video would know that we're going to head to NPR land for a while. It's going to be a pretty deep dive into NPR land. And Savvy, I'd like you to lead the charge here. I have lots of notes, and I have a slideshow I could go into, but I'd like you said you had lots of questions for me as a person whose work has been on NPR. I've been on Morning Edition. I've been on All Things Considered, and I've been on newscasts. I worked for an NPR affiliate for a while. I'm very familiar with that world. You said you had plenty of questions for me. Bring it on.
Yes, so I'm going to be that loud student in the front of the class that like ask the professor
So why?
for you to do your lecture. So I mean, Yuri Berliner, who has now been who's now resigned, and you told me without severance,
Yeah, yeah.
posted.
Of course, he wouldn't get severance. He resigned. They didn't fire him.
You don't think he could have negotiated like, yo, I'll resign if you fucking pay me X amount of money?
I don't think they would.
Mm, okay.
I
Well,
think
so
in this
he
I think in this case, especially, they were punishing him for sure. As I think I texted you, this is 40 lashes in NPR
NPR
speak
style,
by
yeah.
having David Folkenflick basically rip his argument apart. And I don't think, I like Folkenflick broadly, but in this case, I don't think Folkenflick he's obviously not impartial when it comes to NPR.
No,
Uh,
you're putting it too
Eric,
kindly. He was full of shit.
you think he's full of shit entirely?
Yeah, I think this. Okay, so for the benefit of the audience, those who don't know, Yuri Berliner, former what's his exact title? He was an executive producer there of
I think he
the
was a senior
finance
editor.
senior editor. Okay, okay. Um, he wrote an editorial on the Free Press titled "NPR has why we've lost the trust" or something.
Mhm.
Why NPR has lost the public's trust, and he basically, I guess you could call him a whistleblower. That's a little strong, but he talked about how he tried to alert people within the organization about NPR's like political, ideological sort of calcification. Here we go. And this was met by a very predictable reaction from people at NPR like David Folkenflick, where they just don't. I mean, this was compared to dog whistling to the right and making people unsafe and all of this happy horse shit that we've been hearing. I mean, when you're completely like drunk on a certain Kool-Aid, nothing's going to get through to you. So, of course, this was met with resistance internally. Everything about the reaction has to me been very, very predictable. And here we are. My question for you is, how much did this resonate with your experience? Because you were at our local NPR affiliate. From what years exactly were you there?
2018 to oh to 22.
Okay. So right in the thick of
Or
a
was it?
lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was 22.
Right. I know you were there obviously during the pandemic.
Yeah,
But okay, so
in the summer of love.
yes, reading this, what was your response? How did you feel? How much did this chime with things you saw?
Uh, in response, I'm going to read the title of this piece because I think it
Mhm.
says it well. I've been at NPR for 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust. Yuri Berlina, a veteran at the public radio institution, says the network lost its way when it began telling listeners how to think. An open minded spirit no longer exists within NPR. And now, predictably, we don't have an audience that reflects America. And I totally understood where he was coming from. It made total sense to me. It was exactly the way. I think he laid it out incredibly well. In my feelings, some people will take this as an insult, and I don't put it this way. I don't think it's an insult because I don't think news from a perspective is necessarily wrong. But I think that news from a perspective without admitting what the perspective is, it's deceptive. Um, and some of the things he mentioned about laying out sort of playing to an audience that doesn't exist, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So assuming things about your audience. Um, um, Essentially, you're teaching the audience certain phrases and buzzwords. Um, Intersectionality is one that was, like, you know, um, jammed in.
Latinx.
Latinx is another, and every Hispanic person or part Hispanic person like yourself who I've heard who I've talked to about Latinx, they kind of like shrug, except the most progressive people I've encountered. But but outside of that, they've all sort of like, why are you using this word? I would never describe myself like that. Why are you forcing this on me? And has become this was one of many, 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 many symptoms that he hit on, that he described well, um, that I felt like was totally on the money.
Mm.
I felt like it's about damn time that someone said it and said it in a
Mhm.
public forum. And I wish I, as you said, the reaction was predictable. That there's this fierce defense of this institution as that has been recreated in the image of sort of leftist politics. And then it's all NPR has always leaned left,
Mhm.
but it's a there's certainly been a hard shift in the last
Right.
15 years for sure.
Like I said,
Um
it's calcified along with
mhm,
these more ideologically entrenched strains that
sure.
have arisen
Yeah.
among progressives.
Yeah. And there's multiple levels here. There's the mothership, NPR proper, and there's the affiliates, which are not, they pay NPR proper to have access to their content. They are part of the NPR network. Um, and both have sort of taken a hard lean. I find myself knowing very, very well a former fellow NPR affiliate employee, um, uh, and talking, who was employed there for a very long time, and through the late '90s into the aughts, and just talking about the shift that happened. And some of it certainly was intentional. Some of it is the type of person I think that's drawn to nonprofit work today, that's drawn to um, public media work broadly. And I think, as has happened at a lot of institutions over the last, especially the last decade, but speeding up in the last 5 years, there has been an intentional march to the furthest extremes of the left, um, and building incentives along the way to go in that direction and build everything around that direction. And I thought he hit a lot of things. He said a lot of things very well.
Well, and so one of the things that Katie Herzog and Jesse Single pointed to in their episode, which I want to ask you about, it's really funny because Katie Herzog has been listening to NPR. She said by choice since she was in 5th grade, and Jesse called her a sicko for listening that much. But they both say they find it unlistenable now, even though Katie plows through and listens to it anyway. What they were saying was that this is actually this move towards, you call it, a lot of people call this radical left. I always call it this perversion of the left. Uh, um, um, They were saying that this actually alienates NPR's core audience and doesn't get them new people. And they told this hilarious story about a show where you just did I send this to you? Did you hear this? The
I
show
didn't.
where
I
they
didn't. No, I did not. I did not hear that one.
about a show that's all about just like trains. like like the show is all about like just being on trains and like watching the countryside go by.
Mhm.
And the host felt the need to inject that, well, not everybody can enjoy this because they're the descendants of people who were
What?
the the subject of genocide. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that bad. And when you got there, like, because you were talking about how there's the mothership and then there's the local affiliates, but I always felt that there's a pretty uniform culture amongst the whole tree and all the different branches.
Mhm.
When you got there, what was your response to the sort of overall mentality? What did you think of it versus when you left? Like, how much did it change over that time?
I felt like it got more intense. I felt like, first of all, I understood it more. Like I understood, like what was the paraphrase the phrase that someone doesn't it's hard for someone to fight against something in which their paycheck depends upon it,
Mm,
right? I'm butchering that quote, but that's the theme that, like, when you're inside an institution like that, you learn guardrails. You learn what they want. It's not just this is an NPR exclusive. This is especially in any media institution. You learn what they want and you learn what they don't want. What they
mhm,
find interesting, what they find attractive, what'll get you more airtime and what does not. And me,
mhm,
the hard-headed person I am, would still jam in, whether it's subversive things or non or things that were just off message often. Um, and it's not as if the message is something that's overt, that someone's like, hey, except in a few ways. There were a few ways that especially at the beginning. At the beginning, it was not super overt. Um,
mm,
we wanted to reflect. We wanted to serve our audience, and we wanted to serve our community, and we're offering a service that just doesn't exist anywhere else, and which is all true. It doesn't exist anywhere else, which is part of the problem, and I'll get to more of that later. But to stay on your question, it got blatantly obvious. There was one thing that I hated. I loathed it. I hated filling this thing out. But this is where it got blatantly obvious. We had to fill out a form, which I think Yuri mentioned in his piece, or maybe it was in the New York Times piece, is one of them, where we had to track every person that we talked to for a story by race,
mhm.
gender. We were asked to ask about their sexuality,
Ask them.
ask them.
Yes, because Jesse and Jesse brought this up.
Yeah,
And in a lot of cases, if you're asking people, it's going to make them
of
hostile.
course.
Yeah, which is so, oh my
Yeah,
God, it's
it
just
was it
so,
was why I didn't want to do it. Like it was, I might still have a copy of the form.
right.
um,
You had to ask pronouns,
um,
right? Or what they identify, gender, no, what gender they identify as,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I
There's a
did.
specific phrasing.
Yeah, I did ask gender. Um, yeah. I didn't ask for pronouns specifically, but I did definitely had to ask about gender.
Hmm.
And um, it just made me feel weird.
Of course it would. Of course, but it's not an appropriate question in every setting.
And
In fact, it's
I
mostly an inappropriate. Sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah,
No, no, no.
I do think it's mostly an inappropriate question. And I remember pushing back in like, hey, like this is weird. I just found this person just poured their heart out to me about whatever. And then I'm like, hey, can you tell me like where you live, who you are? Like in like all like in an unnatural fashion in order to track this so that we wanted to make sure that basically that the people that we were putting on air were less white. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Mm-hmm. And
Uh,
more gender variable.
yeah, and the other element of it that didn't make much sense to me about it was okay, these are public officials often that I found myself talking to about stuff. And yeah, a bunch of public officials are white. So what? What, are we going to not talk to them? These people are elected. Oh, they're you I talked to the governor. I remember correctly. I believe I quoted the governor, and I was asked to like fill out one of these forms of like, what, you want me to call the governor's office to like to ask all these questions? Like it was ridiculous.
Wouldn't the governor's office be like, that's all on the fucking public record?
Well, I think they
Google me, bitch. Wouldn't they say that?
Oh yeah, I still have the survey.
But wouldn't they just be like, Google me? It's on my fucking
Yeah.
.gov page.
Yeah. I'll take you through the question. I'll read the questions for you.
Oh my God.
What race or races do you identify with? What's your gender identity? What's your age? Your zip code? Your name? Who interviewed you? This one is fair. The topics that were covered in the interview. I understand that part, wanting to like, okay, let's track how many stories of what stripe we cover.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that was one of the moments where it truly clicked with me.
Mm-hmm.
The focus on race and in particular race and sexuality within the programming, and it forced me to start to listen closer to what was going on around me, the kind of stories that we were asked to do, both the simple ones and the more intense ones. And it started to get my brain going and wonder, why are we structuring things like this? And it was what the institution wanted. And that was what they wanted to put forth. We weren't trying to reflect our audience and cover things that our audience wanted. It was just doing things differently.
What this younger cohort of media people, journalists, and media people thought was
that
like,
wasn't
like the banging the drum that they marching to the drum beat that they think is right.
That was actually more of my USA Today experience than my experience at XXI. This was more, I think, fear of it. And I think trying to keep up with the Joneses, of what the other affiliates and the mothership were doing. It was like we need to. They're doing this, therefore we should. I didn't see much of a groundswell up from that perspective, at least not.
Okay, but I'm sure they knew what had happened at the New York Times.
Oh, well, without a doubt.
And were anticipating that. Okay, and we're also well aware that the social climate, how punishing it is to anybody who deviates. So maybe they're just trying to head off problems
Yeah.
at the past. But it's, I mean, just knowing some of the people that worked at our affiliate station, some of the people we both know,
Mhm.
it's not like those people had to be dragged kicking and screaming
No.
into this.
No. Look, it's a self-selecting group. And I think, and it's not, I think like any workplace, you choose to put yourself in that environment, especially when it comes to a place like public radio, um, in public TV. Um, uh, you choose to, I think, and I think it was a little bit different for me in that I wanted to change my trajectory and change the kind of work I was doing. And I do think there are people who want to do that. But I think the lifers especially they choose to be there because they think it reflects the programming and the reality of the station reflects who they are, what they want to be, how they want to see um how they want to see the world um in macro.
Well, I think it reflects, I would go further, and I'm not going to speak for everybody there, but I think there's plenty of people, I would wager, who work there, reflects how they think the world actually is
Yeah.
and
Or it
should
should be.
be. Yeah. I wanted to draw your attention and our audience's attention and run this by you.
Mhm.
This is a 2011 piece
Sure.
segment that ran in May of 2011 on Fresh Air.
Sure.
So Terry Gross was interviewing S.C. Gwynn, who wrote the book Empire of the Summer Moon, which traces the rise and fall of the Comanche Nation.
Mhm.
And in this interview, they point blank talk about, there's a section on rewriting history to leave out Native American atrocities. And there's a point where they say, have we overcompensated in presenting, in essentially whitewashing Comanche atrocities, and Gross and Gwynn grapple with that in the segment. There's no way in hell that I mean, it just goes to show,
Yeah.
in the space of a decade, how far things changed. Like, if
Yeah.
that piece, I'm surprised nobody pointed out that piece should be taken down and people should be made to apologize and,
Mhm.
be marched out and fucking do the whole walk of shame.
I I think we're not quite there yet. Yeah, in that I and also I think there are sacred cows.
Is Terry Gross, is Fresh Air one of them?
I would say so. Yeah, that's one of the crown jewels. I don't think they would go after one of the crown jewels.
Well, I don't think anybody noticed. There's really,
Well, I think that's probably true too. Yeah.
because if enough people made enough noise, I think they would have had to at least answer or wring their hands
About it.
over it somehow and issue some sort of mealy mouthed fucking. But I mean, that is night and day. That's inconceivable in today's
Shall I
media
read this,
landscape.
or do you want to?
Well, I mean, it's pretty quick. I mean, it's you can read it. I just wanted to get your take on the difference in tone between that and what you were surrounded with.
Well, I'll read it and then we can get into it. On rewriting history to leave out Native American atrocities. There was even an attempt at one point to deny that Indians were warlike. Okay, let's start with that sentence. Even using the term Indians, I think that would be, that would be considered problematic by the time I got there. Comanches were incredibly warlike. They swept everyone off the southern plains. They nearly exterminated the Apaches. And look at the Comanches, and you look back at history at the Goths and Vikings or Mongols or Celts. Old Celts were actually a very good parallel. In a lot of ways, I think we're looking back at earlier versions of ourselves. We, being white European, did all these things, not only because war was institutionalized during things like the Counter Reformation in the Spanish Inquisition and the Russian Revolution. The Comanches were kind of like Spartans. Go ahead.
Right, and at one point he talks about right. He talks about the incredible violence, how life on the plains was just incredibly violent, and murdering people and torturing them was just par for the course. And there's one part in the segment where Terry Gross asks him, "Have we overcompensated by not telling that part of the story?" And I want to compare it to In Defense of Looting.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
How could you forget, right? How could you forget?
I mean, look,
Vicky Osterweil.
Yeah, let me go find In Defense.
I have it.
Okay, send that over here.
But they rescinded the original headline.
Yeah.
Which
I'm sure it's on the Wayback Machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, totally. So, what was the original headline though?
It might have been In Defense of Looting.
Yeah.
I remember that effect.
Yep. But anyway,
and oh boy, I hate Code Switch. Oh my God,
What do you hate about it?
Code Switch. And Yuri Berliner talked about it as well. Code Switch was the attempt of NPR to overcompensate. Hey, how do I say this properly? They felt like they were what this show was reflecting Black culture. What they were really reflecting was a caricature of Black culture.
Was white misunderstanding of Black culture.
And really, really, really liberal Black people's feelings about Black culture. And the whole show was built upon that.
Right, and that reflects the anxieties of typically upper middle class, very educated Black liberals who themselves feel a need to overcompensate and shine a spotlight on what they think Blackness is, and they feel that they don't have enough of it usually, right? So they have to then that gets projected onto their work. You see this all the time.
Yeah. And I'll share one of the things that I've really felt, especially there, and not just there, but in a lot of places. But there was I felt that there. I felt, like I'm a hard luck kid, Black kid, who grew up and I quote made good, I guess. And I felt like in that land that people like the idea of me, this sort of Black guy who talks with proper English, comes from nothing and can, tell a good story instead of liking me.
Once you open your mouth and they realize you're contrary on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And don't take to being patronized.
Yeah.
Or and like people making assumptions about you.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the above.
And that you're generally grumpy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am.
Right.
Look,
that you're not going to receive their attempts to be like, oh, hi, James, you're black. Like, they don't say that, but you can see it on their faces a lot of time.
Yeah, I got that sense from certain people, not everybody, but certain people, yes. And I've got that throughout my career, but I think it's the and I don't think it's simply a issue with black folks. I think it's a issue with the world of politics, and this is why I feel strongly that NPR in many ways is the inverse of Fox News, in that most of the tropes about different parts of the culture that they're dispensing are this weird caricature of reality
Mhm.
that um if you are a black person who comes out of poverty, or you must be an uber progressive person,
By their definition, yeah, of what that means, yeah.
just inherently, like
Mhm.
that you're essentially that.
Mhm.
um that if a nonprofit does X to quote help the community, that it is inherently good. That if um, that that if a Republican is interested in X or Y or Z, that's discounted. If it is, even if it's something that most people would look at as a positive, that it's more important to reflect that the Democrat doing
Mhm.
the the positive thing. Um, and I, I when I read Yuri's description, I felt like he hit on so much. And I could bring up pieces of it if you like.
Well, I mean,
Unless you have more questions, you can go
yeah, I
ask
mean,
away.
years ago, you said, this is before you worked at NPR, that you thought it would actually be fine if NPR lost its government funding.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you to unpack that.
Okay. So just by broadly, NPR receives somewhere between 3 and 10% of their funding from the federal government. Now, there's a few ways that they receive this money. Some of it's just direct from the government, and they fight for it like mad every day. And then there's like pass throughs. So like the government funds X foundation or Y foundation, and that money mixes back to NPR. Um, so we end up with a fight for um, the government funded label. The label that they quit X, Twitter, in a huff over about a year ago, is only, we're talking single digits of their actual enterprise
Budget. Mm.
that could be easily replaced. Like you could get it from foundations. You could run more underwriting or ads. They call ads underwriting. There are other ways to get that money. In that way, you remove the tether of the government, and you remove the argument that mostly people on the right, but even people like myself who are sort of like other, you know, um, make about, hey, like, how dare this public funded thing operate this way?
Mhm.
I think that as an institution, you can operate whatever way you want, and And actually, I think it would make them stronger as a brand if they weren't leaning on the government subsidy.
Mm.
I feel like leaning on the government subsidy provides them with a weak spot um, that I think is generally bad. Now, there's a whole other level to that because also I was just speaking about the national level because individual affiliates also get funding from the government, federal, state, and sometimes local. So they're all so on top of that 8% or so, these affiliates are all going to their congressmen, they're going to their state senators, governors, whoever, to bring on even direct funding to their affiliates. And I think that also sort of shades how you approach those people. I think um, it's not that they can't cover them. I don't know that if you're relying on a congressman
Right.
or a governor or
Mhm.
whoever to butter your bread, you're going to be less likely to criticize that person.
Sure, sure.
So you'd be in a stronger place as a journalism outlet if that was indeed your goal without those things. Yes, I know
Mm.
from a fiscal perspective, okay, we can depend on that 8%. And it's not going to go anywhere. Like the government's going to be there, unless we go bankrupt or which we might, who knows, we might collapse tomorrow. But as long as the government's there, we're going to get that 8% guaranteed. And we don't have to ask our listeners for more. Frankly, if I were running the show, I'd rather ask my listeners for more than rely on these things that are going to keep us from being impartial. Unless you're not worried about being impartial.
Right. Well, it seems like that train has left the station because what you were saying at the beginning, every media entity has an outlook
Mhm.
and these parameters and
Sure.
of what their perspective, how they see the world, and the picture they want to paint, whether it's conscious or not. And I think it's usually a combination. But I think at this point, like the mentality that's driving NPR is not aware of its own biases,
Sure.
right? I want to read to you my tweet in response to David Flick's
Defense.
post. Yeah. So I tweeted NPR doubling down against Yuri Berliner's assessment of their bias is like a goldfish insisting it doesn't live in a fishbowl. Of course, it's going to do that. It's literally incapable of doing anything else.
Yeah.
Those who've gotten drunk on the sense that they dictate the terms of culture are not going to let it go. I put that in all caps until their hands are pried off the steering wheel. The best we can all do is ignore them as they wither on the vine and do our best not to succumb to our own fisheye view. And then my last thing is, and to staffers like Alfonso Fernal, pimping their Latin heritage as a way of leveraging the demand that we all nod along to their propaganda while they keep their head in the sand, the answer is simple: stop. You don't speak for all Latin people, and the jig is up.
Yeah.
Because
Uh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, you
Well,
go ahead.
Fernal was like, Berlin, Yuri's language is demeaning to Latin people.
Yeah. Um, this is it just takes me back to a point that you hit on earlier
Mm-hmm.
about it not reflecting the audience and not speaking to the audience, or if in fact I'll sharpen it. It
Mm-hmm.
is speaking to an audience, but it's speaking to a much smaller audience than they realize.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll just pull out a stat that Yuri used it in his article, and I saw it in several different articles. To quote him, back in 2011, although NPR's audience tilted to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners describe themselves as conservatives, 23% as middle of the road, and 37% liberal.
Wow. What's
Okay.
the other percent? That doesn't add up to 100.
Other.
Okay. Okay.
Other. So care to guess where those numbers were in 2023? What percentage do you think of NPR listeners describe themselves as conservative or somewhat conservative?
0.8%.
You're way off.
Okay. I don't know. 11. Okay, that's I mean, that's more than that's more. So are those hate listeners?
I'll get there in a moment.
Because that seems like a lot. Like,
I'll get there in a moment,
okay,
and this
okay.
would be my defense of NPR is coming shortly. 21% as middle of the road, and 67% were very or somewhat liberal. We aren't just losing conservatives; we're also losing moderates and traditional liberals.
Who have typically been their bread and butter, right?
Yes, without a doubt.
Right.
Okay, so you asked essentially, why are those conservatives listening?
Yeah, what on earth?
There's a larger problem going on with news, especially local news. We see it with newspapers, and we see it with news, period. In radio news in particular. They're quickly dissipating, just totally disappearing. We locally in Rochester is a great example. Our affiliate absorbed a paper that we both wrote for. The NPR affiliate absorbed the city newspaper. Our newspaper, the Democratic Chronicle, was on strike shortly ago because they were been in a labor dispute because some people hadn't got pay raises in over a decade. And at the same time, that paper is shrinking. It has become essentially a regional paper instead of covering this particular city in the outlining areas. Let alone the fact that they bought the suburban papers around Rochester, absorbing that coverage as well. So a bunch of reporters who would have been working are no longer working. And when it comes to talk radio in terms of radio news, our station, WHAM 1180, much like many stations around the country, essentially is a bare bones staff. They do morning and afternoon reports, and that's pretty much it.
Wow.
So what happens is, if you want to know about basically any important news on the radio, you ain't got nowhere else to go. A lot of that public service journalism that used to be in newspapers, that used to be in alt weeklies, that used to be in commercial radio, no longer exists or is in bare bones fashion. And now it's been absorbed, and that role has been taken by NPR affiliates. So if you're trying to, find out what's going on in a council meeting, your TV stations are rarely at these meetings. Let alone, and I can speak from personal experience. Your newspapers are rarely at these meetings, but chances are you're gonna have an NPR affiliate reporter there because there's a gap there in terms of media and journalism that they're the only one even attempting to fill.
Okay. Okay. That's really interesting. I didn't know that was the case. So you're saying that at least at the affiliate level, the
Mhm.
conservative listenership is looking for local news.
Yeah, because there's very few places that actually get it,
Hmm.
and it's shrinking.
So what is the future of their health as an organization as far as maintaining their audience as you see it?
Oh, this was covered extensively by the New York Times, and I thought they actually did a really, really pretty nice job explaining some of the problems that they have. Let me
Wow,
show you.
imagine that. The New York Times actually doing journalism.
Yeah, and New York Times has similar issues, but like I think they nailed a few things here. I want to go right down to the Times. To read this for our listeners, NPR is huge but shrinking. While NPR still has an audience of about 42 million who listen every week, that's cumulative. Many of them digitally, that is down from an estimated 60 million in 2020, according to an internal March audience report. A fall off faster for broadcast radio, which is also in long term decline.
Yeah, faster fall off than what
Yeah,
broadcast radio is going through, which is
yeah,
that says a lot, right? That their
yeah.
digital is shrinking faster than
Hmm.
broadcast. Terrest, yeah,
Yeah. In
that
2023, NPR generated 110 million in corporate sponsorship revenue, a decrease
101.
of 101 million, a decrease of about 25% from the previous year.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, so I mean, where did things go from here?
Um, okay, so my girlfriend, all right, in many ways, she is an ideal, total sweet spot for an NPR listener, right? In terms of politics, in terms of age, gender, all that.
And when she's home, right? Or that doesn't matter so much. That
Period.
doesn't matter. Yeah,
Period.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Period. She's not doing it. I think you're going to see, and it's not,
Mm,
and I think she's not the only one making that choice. There's a lot of people who are making that choice where they're
mm.
choosing to not enmesh themselves in this world. That's a horrific sign for the future.
Yeah, because I don't see. I'm really curious about that because from what I know of her outlook and what she values, she's not being put off by the types of things they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that is not drawing her?
Well, I think there's a couple things, and I think this helps explain it. This is also from that Times article. I believe that public radio has 5 to 7 years to reimagine itself before it's simply unsustainable.
Mm,
And they can't take 2 or 3 years of that time debating a business model.
mm. So they have to act now and yeah, decide whether they're going to try to survive or not,
Yeah.
whether they're going to make the choices necessary. I don't
Yeah.
see. I wonder whether the culture within the organization is too um,
Jaundiced.
set, yeah, to be able to r-
I
steer the ship on the right track.
I totally agree. It's too jaundiced. It's too much. Um, I can't see a scenario where they adjust enough in order to survive at this level. What I think is that the disappearance of those other elements in the marketplace will keep it around,
Mm.
because since no one else is filling the gap, the gap's got to be filled by somebody. So unless we see a resurgence in a bunch of journalism from other perspectives, like a bunch of startups show up that actually eat, more and more of the marketplace, like news consumers have to go somewhere. So they're going to end up there.
I mean, isn't it possible though that somebody at the administrative level could properly diagnose the situation and institute a culture change?
Define, no.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
no. And here's why. There's a phrase that I've been playing around with. It's called the nonprofit giving industrial complex.
I like it. I like that.
There,
That's good.
there are a lot of organizations who have incentivized some of the decisions that they're making, and that a lot of other organizations are making, about the perspective of what they put on the air.
Mm. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah. This is like leached into the soil at other, like leached into the water that streams down from the mountaintop to feed this farm patch of media, right? So it's poisoned from before it even gets to this level. So things would have to change at the nonprofit stage first.
And that ain't happening.
And right.
That ain't happening.
As I've mentioned on this show, talking to you, man, you go to these grant pages, and holy fuck, the language is so cookie cutter. My God.
I won't get specific. I'll try to be non-specific about, but this is one of the things another thing that drove me batty. So there were grant money that the station received to create certain stories about a certain group. And we had to crank out a certain amount of those stories every month in order to make the grant fulfill the grant requirements.
Wow.
And when it came to criticism of that group or any members of this group, it got hairy. You couldn't structure it. You had to be very, very careful with such stories because you couldn't criticize them.
So let me ask you, why are you being careful about talking about this now?
No comment.
Okay. Can we put the postcard I made for our audience?
Yeah, give me a moment.
The greeting card.
Man. Oh man.
We're about to knock down a Baltimore bridge in your career by putting this graphic up.
Yeah, it's over at that point. Oh man,
Jim's like, I don't know if I can find the file.
yeah, I'm looking for the file right now. Okay, all right, I'm going back to the email. Oh yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
This is a greeting card I sent to Professor Brown here.
It is very, very funny. I
I made it myself, by the way.
yeah. There you go.
Ah! I
Look,
love it.
and the thing I love the most, well, there's two things I love about it. A, my beard looks glorious in that one. And two, it's true. Look, I think a lot of people, he revealed something that they hadn't even actually consciously considered.
Now they have to deal with it in some way. They're not dealing well.
Or do they?
I mean, they have to
you know,
confront. They have to confront. I think they're clearly circling the wagons and saying this is
sure.
just. And the moment the thing I suggested to you, I was like, as soon as that piece ran on the free press, the free press, I was
Yeah.
like, I bet you his job offer from Barry Weiss is fucking sitting right there.
Yeah.
Because
I
he's
mean,
got to know he's going to get fired, and there have to be media organizations dying to have this
uh,
turncoat.
well, and also look, the guy's really talented. The guy has like he's got a long storied background. He's worked in a lot of forums. I mean, if he wants to continue in media, I mean, I'm certain there's a lot of different roles he could conceivably get. I think the problem he's going to have is that this is not an NPR exclusive issue.
No, and it's the same in
At a
basically
lot of
any direction you go in, and any direction you go in, right? It's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, so you're either the times which I paid compliments for, I think maybe for the first time in the show's history
That's
today.
more than they deserve.
Um, you're gonna lean to the left. If you go to CNN, it's gonna be the same thing. Similar structure. If you go to Fox, you're gonna end up in the same way. If you go to MSNBC,
right.
you're gonna go to like all these places are so married to their ideology that you can't just go and be.
Right.
Which
It's very balkanized. Even right, and he probably thinks that like conservative media is one thing when it's split into. I mean, there's overlap, obviously, but it's
yeah,
split into different camps there as
no,
well.
very much so.
Yeah, I mean, right. So
He also considers himself a man of the left. So, if you and he says that in the piece clearly, like look, I counted there were 87 Democrats and no Republicans. Like that includes him. So I think it would be difficult for him to like go to many environments. I think if he, like you said, the free press might be a place. That seems to be a place where where there's conservative and liberal viewpoints on there.
yeah, but Barry Weiss is looking for her red meat to throw to her people too.
Sure.
And if he doesn't want to, if he was willing to become one of these axe grinder,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
types who like now I'm out to expose, and I'm really gonna be out front with that and be disgruntled about it and like become this steroidal anti-wokester, then he would thrive.
Yeah.
But he doesn't sound like he wants to do that.
Yeah, he sounded heartbroken, honestly.
Well, that divorce came quick. They fucking threw his ass out on the curb. Like he had to know that was coming, though.
Yeah.
He had to know, don't you think?
Yeah.
Or do you think, when you picture what's in his head, I wonder how much he thought, well, maybe there's a way through this where I can keep my job. What's a percentage that he thought that?
90-10.
Okay.
So 10.
Okay. Okay.
That maybe they would
value his loyalty or something,
or maybe they're like, oh, maybe this would be a rough period, but there's no way that the NPR, boss is going to call me out. There's no
Or
way that all that coworkers would get in a meeting and dogpile me and try to destroy me. That's not going to happen. I've given them 25 years of my life. They're not going to turn on me.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe he had some inkling. Oh, they might listen to me.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and look, if you read the piece, he described years of going to different bosses, trying to like say, hey, we're leaning way, 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 way left here, and 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 people looking at him like he was kind of crazy, instead of listening to Morning Edition and hearing ridiculous stories about thin privilege. Like
Or riding trains and not being able to.
yeah, like it's just it is wild, wild, but they didn't get it. And they didn't understand it. Then they kind of just like say, huh, all right, good, yeah, thanks for telling me. Yeah, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare you? Yeah. I gotta listen to you because you've been here for a long time, but I'm just gonna smile and do what I want to do.
Right. They couldn't fire him for coming to talk to them, but now they had reason
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And they had to make an example of him and be like, you're not gonna launch into your next career and get a severance from us.
Yeah.
Fuck you, basically. What is the conservative equivalent, in your view, of this? You keep calling it liberal. I call it like a
Leftist.
metastasized version of progressivism. Um, what is the conservative version of that?
Well, as an institution, kind of a convulsion. I don't think we actually talked about it, or did we? We did talk about Candace and Ben, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, essentially, that's a similar,
situation.
spasm, like where it's like, how dare you stray off the farm, and it by straying off the farm, we're gonna give you 40 lashes and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, interesting. It's just this is the way the lines are drawn
Yeah,
until we create
it's where we
something
are.
new,
It's where we are in this era until we have a fundamental change media wise.
which I think
It's
is
usually
coming.
if it's coming, it's usually a technological shift of some sort, and I don't see it.
Here's how I think it's coming. Somebody's got to expose audiences to an appetite they didn't know they had.
Yeah,
Like when Joe Rogan came out. Now, Joe Rogan was around for years, but I know when his stuff first started getting popular, all I had been hearing all for years at that point was nobody wants to listen to anything more than attention
mhm,
spans are so shot. Nobody has the
sure,
patience. Nobody blah, 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 blah. Until he introduced us to an appetite we didn't realize we had.
yeah,
Similarly, I think there are always going to be people who want to be balkanized and be in their camp. But there are lots and lots of people who are really craving some form of, I don't want to call it balance, but some form of counterweight
yeah,
and being sort of re-threaded back into the social fabric, even if they don't know that. And I mean, it's similar to, how each YouTube channel, every Substacker has this like Zoom component where they hang with their audience, blah, blah, blah. It's like everybody wants community that way. They wouldn't have initially described it as, oh, I'm subscribing to this podcast because I'm looking for community. They wouldn't have put it in those terms.
hmm,
But then you see people sort of fall into those patterns. I think the co-op model can spark somebody in the tech part of it to be like, oh, there's something here.
Mhm.
Let's monetize this. That's what I'm hoping happens anyway.
I can see that happening. I see another thing as well. Did you pay attention at all to the zero hedge debate on Israel?
No, no. I saw that you know, I saw that it occurred, but I didn't watch.
Yeah. For those who don't know, it was Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Dave Smith, the comedian and libertarian podcaster, Dennis Prager, the Christian conservative uh, podcaster, radio host, and Batya Angar Sargon, who is part of The Hill
The
and
Hill,
I
yep.
believe Newsweek as well.
Hmm.
And what you had were four people, four, all in different ways, bright people sitting in a room with Sagar and Janetti from Breaking Points having a good faith debate. And people flock to it. And these are the kind of things that you wouldn't hear on an NPR. You're not going to hear on a lot of
Any
any major league outlets because they came to a conclusion. This is going back to Ta-Nehisi Coates, comes back to Wes Lowry, who made this argument as well, where it's like we are making the morally right story, therefore we don't have to care about what the other side thinks.
Mm, 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 mm.
Um, so instead, you had two sides of this coin, just battling it out with different perspectives. You had four very different perspectives. You actually had Cenk Uygur and Dave Smith actually like agreeing. And if you had these two, this Young Turks and Part of the Problem, their shows, if you would have thought before this, like you wouldn't have believed it.
Right.
But yeah, and having this moment together where they have an open discussion. Um, Dave Smith mentioned this concept a couple of years ago because he worked for CNN as a contributor for a while.
I'm a big fan of his, by the way. I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything. I feel like he's done, at least as far as I can tell, he's done a really good job of staying grounded and sounding reasonable and not at least coming off like he's captured and trying to chase the easy um trying to chase the easy reward of like ramping up his rhetoric. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with everything but one of your points there. He is captured. He admits he's
Okay.
captured.
Okay.
He's up front with his capture. He's a hardcore libertarian. Like he is an ANCAP a libertarian. He doesn't think it should be a government, and he's up front about it.
Right, but do you think that that's distorted his viewpoint where he's performing
He's
an
not
exaggerated? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, that's part of the problem. That's part of the NPR problem. That's part of the New York Times problem. That's the part of the Fox News problem.
And that's part of the problem for part of the problem, I guess.
Yeah. Right. That, hey, they're not saying, hey, this is where I'm coming from. Kind of like a talk radio host, a good talk radio host. That's usually what you do. You like, hey, this is where I'm coming from. This is my bedrock.
Right. There's no illusions with Clay Travis.
No, there's no illusions with a guy like Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh back in the day. I don't know if you ever listen to Tom Hartman.
Mm-mm.
Tom Hartman's he's a very, I'd say he's a Bernie liberal talk show host, right? You listen to his show, like you know what you're getting. And he's coming from this perspective. He's clear on his perspective, and he's going to give things from that perspective.
So then maybe that's the answer. Sorry to interrupt, but maybe that's the solution then. Because what I don't like about so many of these voices is that they drift and they just become this. I don't even know, this like monstrosity compared to what they were, because the audience responds and they start playing into that. But
Sure.
maybe if you're just fucking like, all right, I'm just fucking throwing the gauntlet down on the table. Like, this is what I am, this is what I do. Then people are coming to you more instead of shaping what you are.
I
Like,
I would agree with that for the most part. I think the thing you're talking about is audience capture. Um, Essentially where you are playing to your audience, trying to inflame them in ways that you know will inflame them. You're not simply speaking from an honest place. You are speaking from a place that you think will get you the most reaction from your audience. And in a lot of cases, when you want to expand your audience, you go and and Colin Coward has said this. You know, you go. He says, once a show, you should say something that's completely wrong. That you should just piss off your audience. That you should say something that will get you attention. And I think that's what you're also describing, where a lot of guys, they're not coming on with their honest perspective. They're just coming on and they're saying whatever to piss off the public, and in order to like have something go viral.
yeah, I mean, at least as far as the sense I get, I mean, again, I could be wrong, but I just feel like Dave Smith doesn't ever seem like he's pandering or tap dancing for that. But that's maybe it's just his calm the tone of voice that I'm
Yeah, I get that
fine.
sense too. I don't think he's pandering. Um, I think that he's more than willing to fight with other libertarians. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
and to like he's got a certain point of view, that he's a Mises Caucus libertarian, and he wants to he thinks that he sees the world in one shade and is not afraid to say it.
Right.
So
And
go ahead.
he's also very willing to engage
Yes.
anybody in good faith. So this is encouraging what you're describing. This is
Mhm.
basically the manifestation of, I mean, all those people have big followings,
Mhm.
but that's a good indicator that if we can go in that direction, and the outlets like the Daily Wire and all these other fiefdoms
Mhm.
that have become very successful, that are now major players, they staked their future on being one track.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's appearing as if maybe there's an entire new ecosystem that could open up.
Maybe. Like I am part of me is bullish on that idea, and part of me think that idea is wishful thinking.
Hmm.
Want me to lay out both?
Sure. So
My
you bet
gut.
for and against it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I can bet for and against it. Since this is media studies, I'll give us a bit of a media history lesson. If you go back to the turn of the 20th century media, you got a heavy newspaper culture. You had new newspapers sprouting up all the time from different perspectives. Like there's a reason we have the Democrat and Chronicle, and in some places had the Republican. Um, and you had newspapers of every political persuasion. Every you had newspapers based on Catholicism, on different religions, on there was a labor paper in most markets. There was
Mm.
there are newspapers from every persuasion possible, because the medium printing a newspaper was cheap. It was the equivalent of a new YouTube channel or a podcast. Like you can create a pretty and look, this podcast doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty good. And StreamYard costs freaking $20 a month. Like it's you can get it for even, I think you can get it for $10 a month. Like, so what you got is this landscape of a bunch of different people creating a bunch of different shows or newspapers in that day from a different perspectives, and it being all on this broad menu. My gut says that's the world we're back in. That we're somewhere we're a cross between the old yellow journalism age in the zine culture, newsletter culture that both that ran through the 60s, 70s into the 90s. That's where we are in terms of media. So that is why a heterodox outlet. That's my bear case for a heterodox outlet. Here's my bull case.
Okay.
Unless you want to respond to that one.
No. I'll respond when you're done with both.
Okay. My bull case for it is yes, we saw that debate. Dave Smith made a really interesting argument months, maybe a year ago, where he said, you know what would get, if CNN was really concerned about ratings, you get RFK and Anthony Fauci on TV and have them debate. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That would be a spectacular. That would get a gigantic audience. You would put people, you would put people of different political perspectives together, and you'd have them hash it out. And I do think there's a thirst for that. There were places where that happened regularly. You think Fire and Line being one of them back in the day on PBS. And even to a degree, places, like even Larry King to a degree, where he would bring on one person from one perspective, another person from a different perspective, and have them fight it out, and it just be the good faith moderator that you don't realize you don't know my politics, and I think like that this kind of thing, if put on the proper pedestal, would really, really, really work. But here's the problem with it. It goes back to something I said earlier. These entities, unless one is started from scratch, would not allow it.
So they're working against their own, to some degree, their own incentives in one sense. Now they're with NPR, the funding and the grants, but why wouldn't CNN just go for the big circus tent and say, fuck it, just let's be a spectacle and let everybody come?
Dylan Byers is a media reporter for Puck.
Okay. He
used to work for CNN and NBC News, and has been reporting endlessly about CNN and the inner workings about CNN. And Chris Licht, who was the former president of CNN that was sort of, kicked to the curb, was trying to make a more balanced product there. He's the guy who got rid of Brian Stelter, and respected Brian Stelter. I used to read his blog back in the day, back when he was at TV Newser, and I think I think he does some interesting stuff. But that dude is partisan as fuck.
Sure.
And Lick wanted to move CNN to the center, and internally, the rank and file lost their goddamn minds.
Wow. So this, okay. Well, so here's the thing then. I don't know that what we're looking at is necessarily a I think the marketplace may correct some of this. Like, it seems like these institutions are also entrenched that they will sort of, cut their nose off to spite their face,
Mm-hmm.
even as they like steer away from potential increased audience.
Yeah.
I think somebody's going to come and figure this out marketplace wise. Now, to your first scenario, it's interesting because, all these problems always seem so amplified because we're living in the time period that we're talking about them in. But in a lot of ways, it's almost like, well, we're just going back to like the more things change, the more they stay the same, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
or not kind of. Like it just seems like you get new iterations of previous things, even though it always seems like a radical seismic shifts.
Agreed.
Did you see what I emailed you? That's essential before the next thing I wanted to ask you about.
Okay. I'll download it. Yeah, go on.
So, I mean, are you good with moving on to the?
Well, there was one other NPR point, and I know we've been
Okay.
hammering this for a while, but
It's okay.
I wanted
It's
to
okay.
get this, but because I think it's really interesting. It's in my slides that I really think we touched on, but I want to go deeper because I think it's really interesting.
Is it the one about the like within 1,000 miles of?
No, but
Okay.
that's interesting.
Can we
That,
touch on that too? Also, yeah.
Sure,
That
sure.
piqued my
I'll pull that one up first, and then I'll go into what I was thinking. Okay. More than 98% of the U.S. population lives within listening range of at least one of the more than 1,000 public radio stations that carry NPR programming, including longtime staples like Morning Edition and All Things Considered. That's insane reach.
So what does that suggest? That if they could figure this out, they're in good position to catch people's ears.
Well, I think it's you end up with a branding problem, I think, in that when you are one way, when your brand has gone in one direction for a very long time, it is very difficult to convince the public that you're no longer that.
Mm.
And I think that would be difficult. But their audience potential is massive.
Mm.
Matt. And I think maybe they get there, maybe. But I doubt it.
You're definitely not betting on that.
No. I'd be shocked, frankly.
What was your other? What was the
Yeah.
plan?
All right, I will get there shortly. Let's see. It's down here. Okay. Now, this was the spiciest nugget that I remembered from this this article. Okay,
Is this
so
the Times article?
Times article.
Yep.
Okay, so and Yuri mentioned this in his article as well, but not in depth. NPR, through the racial reckoning era, decided that we are going to fundamentally reshape the hosts of our shows and create things like Code Switch, like we talked about earlier. And this is a quote from the former president of NPR. Our focus on the North Star has led to increased diversity in our content, the voices on air, the sources of our journalists to go to, the broader range of topics and issues discussed on our shows. We want to reach people where they are. Noble goal, right?
Except that they're not.
Well, this is what happened. Would you want to read this one?
Sure. Minority stars. Well, I'll just read the part underneath. NPR's leaders redoubled their efforts to diversify their audience and workforce and closely tracked metrics for reach. They added podcasts aimed at people of color and younger listeners. They promoted people of color to high-profile reporting and hosting jobs, but not James. Just kidding. All of these moves were meant to ensure the nation's public radio network would remain competitive as the country's population continue to grow more diverse. Except, as your heading states, can I read the headline?
Yeah.
Minority stars don't mean a minority audience. Because, if I may just paint a macro picture,
Mhm.
the demographic that subscribes to this outlook has woefully misread the temperature of the country, specifically ethnic minorities in this country who do not subscribe to this outlook, and they cannot get their fucking heads around this. That it's just such an impossible pill for them to swallow. It's like they can't even, they don't even see the pill is so large they're standing on it and don't see that there's a pill to swallow here. That the people of color they're talking about, huge swaths of them don't view the world the same way. And this is a really big deal. Like you just get this sense of this, almost like I whenever I think of this viewpoint, it feels almost like Easter Island to me, like a social cultural Easter Island. Like we are going to fucking like cling to this until the bitter end, until it is impossible to cling to it any longer, and we're all going to be it's going to die off by our own hand.
Yeah. There it is, like you're creating content instead of trying to understand who you're creating content about. It's like you're creating content for a caricature of that person or thing.
Of who you think that person is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you
Or
think
that
it
group.
should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and like I said in my tweet, they're not letting this go. This
No.
is the people who feel this way are it will take a force or a shock of some kind. The culture is going to have to change from under their feet, and it's going to have to be no longer socially expedient.
I-
Like the disincentives are going to have to be so strong to outwardly wear this that then people will then gravitate to whatever the next thing is.
I agree and disagree. And this is where we typically come to down different paths, because I think it's the market. And yes, the social incentives, yes. But I think what's more important is I think that economically, all of these outlets have to be hit so hard that they're forced to change their trajectory
Mm,
economically.
mm.
That profit drop that we talked about earlier, 25% is not enough. It's
Mm.
got to be like 75.
Yeah, but it's going to be another in that range next year, you would think.
Maybe.
It's not going to take long to get there
Yeah.
at this rate.
But even just in a year, that's not going to, they're not going to look at it as compounding. I like you said, they're going to cling and cling and cling and cling. They're not going to, just realize that the compounding problem is enough. And I want to go back to this because this gets even a bit more interesting, I think. Black listeners
Yeah.
made up roughly 11% of NPR's audience in the second quarter of 2023, unchanged from the same period in 2020. The data further showed that the share of Hispanic listeners only went up 2 percentage points in 2020 to account for 16% of the total audience. One 2020 survey from the Pew Research Center found that the people who named NPR their main source for political and election news, 75% were white, more than any other outlet except for Fox News.
I love it. I love
All
it.
right. So you're reshaping your audience, right? You're creating a bunch of new shows.
You're reshaping your programming.
Your programming.
Yeah.
My bad. You're trying to reshape your audience, or you say you're trying to reshape your audience. You're reshaping your programming. You're reshaping your hosts. And your listeners are like, of course they're gonna back off because they're like, hey, like, this doesn't reflect me. This isn't, it's the same problem that Fox is having right now with the Tucker Carlson audience. Like, the Tucker Carlson audience is MAGAville. Mostly. Not all, but mostly. Like, it's a lot of MAGAville. Fox News isn't MAGAville. They're going to get their MAGA fix from Newsmax. They're going to get their MAGA fix from One America News Network. You know, if they listen to the programming and they feel it doesn't reflect them, if they're not comfortable with it, they're going to back up. They're going to back off.
And what's the percentage of Black people, do you think, in the U.S.
In the U.S.?
who feel like NPR's programming would reflect them?
It's
a tough one, but
2.
Wow.
It's very small. This is an anecdotal part, but the only Black people who recognized me and my voice from it were either people I knew or uber liberal community leaders who wanted the airtime.
Yeah, and I mean, those people we've come to learn are, I don't want to say they're grifters outright, but they definitely, they have a hustle. They profit from spreading this gospel in a very particular way. It elevates them to positions of importance. So,
yeah.
If even perceived importance in their own circles, but you know, it's a hustle, you know. Like I feel like when people start banging those notes, they strike those chords, I just feel like, man, you know, you're doing a song and dance here. You know, or maybe you don't know it, maybe, but it just feels like there's been an incentive to become that.
I tend to agree with that.
And you know, again, to tip our cap to Jason Whitlock, when he talks about people who are, he calls them African Americans.
Oh,
when
man.
he talks about people who are mixed, or I would extend it, I think his model is not quite precise enough, but there's people who have hangups about not being quote unquote Black enough, so very educated, middle class or upper middle class, racially mixed, and certain immigrant Black children of immigrant Black people, or children of Black immigrants. Like Godfrey is the fucking perfect example, who's like my least favorite comedian like ever. But throwing bones to this idea all the time, like refashioning themselves, or what's her name? Malika Andrews.
Yeah.
Is another one. You know, there's this, they carry this with a chip on their shoulder because they clearly feel, I think Whitlock has been really good at diagnosing this. They clearly feel like they are not enough, and they have this warped view of what Blackness is, and they feel they have to perform and play into it. It's really fascinating. Somebody should write a book on this, actually.
Yeah. I wonder how quickly we'll be boycotted.
How quickly who will be boycotted?
Oh, the Black left would boycott it. They'd say this whoever wrote it would be tomatoes would be thrown at their
Oh,
head.
sure. They'll be like, wounded. I
Yeah,
feel attacked.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think those are interesting points. I mean, I saw Whitlock's latest beef video
Oh my God.
about, I think it was about Malika, right?
Maybe.
Where about he her coming on NBA Countdown and talking about what, not Zimmerman, Dylan, from the dude from
Kenosha.
Kenosha, yeah. Who, my perspective on that, just to be I think the verdict was right. They overcharged the dude. Like you could if it were, if you're you couldn't, that's not murder by just about, if that was in New York State, that wouldn't be considered murder. Like in any state in the union, it wouldn't be considered murder. You could probably get manslaughter, maybe. But
Yeah,
you
I
have a
remember.
better shot at manslaughter than you would murder with that guy.
I remember when you broke down
Rittenhouse.
that case for me, and
Yeah.
when you broke down the facts of that case, we
Yeah.
weren't streaming, but
Mhm.
you broke down the facts of that case compared to the way it was presented. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What
It was
a
sad.
what a huge chasm between those two. And like that's the thing, like you couldn't say that
Mhm.
at a gathering of most of our friends without like
Yeah.
like people would be, in some cases like you couldn't say that out at a bar without somebody like that
People were
potentially
pissed at
getting
me. A lot of
right.
people were pissed at me. How dare
Well,
me?
where did you say it?
Oh, I said it to friends. I did say it at a bar. I did, and I did say it, I said it at work too. And
Whoo!
that did not go well. But
What happened?
just people looked at me like I was crazy. Like it was like what the hell? It's the how dare you have that opinion kind of, response. And
See, and you're but the thing that I think is interesting that we should point out here is, having the benefit of knowing you for a long time,
yeah.
I think it's interesting because I know that probably what scrambles people's circuits, they know you're not just somebody who's going to say something contrary for the sake of it, or something provocative just for the sake of, they're aware at this point, they've worked with you, they know that you put thought into
Yeah.
whatever perspective you arrive at. So when you say something that's so far afield
Mhm.
from what they're expecting, you're not like you're not Larry Elder.
No.
In their view, like that
Yeah.
would be the closest thing. You're
Yeah.
not Candace Owens,
No.
right?
No.
So
No.
they
No.
know you're not that. So
Yeah, and I think that does kind of blow people's minds, especially like I watched that trial intensely because I thought it was fascinating. But like when you look at that video and you also learn the facts of the case, the fact that that basically it was a border town where people go back and forth all the time. So the idea that he went across state lines to basically to like go kill black people was kind of crazy. Also, there's the fact that he didn't shoot any
any
black people.
black people, right?
None.
Right.
None.
I
These
mean,
were
fuck, man. I don't
um,
know enough about. I honestly don't know as much about the cases you did, but I know. But I'm just saying.
yeah.
Again,
The video also showed them attacking him while he has a gun multiple times. All right. Like it's like, so like in most states, if you attack someone who has a weapon, the weapon that they have legally purchased, if they use that weapon, it's not going to be murder. It might be manslaughter. It's not going to be murder. It's like breaking
right.
in somebody's house, and it's just not going to happen. Like and I think what people thought would happen is I'd be guided by the emotions of the whole larger. I think was it Jacob Blake or what? I forget which one of those incidents it was. And like that isn't how I would come to a conclusion like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, like also you, according to your like breakdown, he you presented it like he legitimately was going there to try to prevent looting.
Yeah. You had um um business owners invite people because like the cops basically surrounded this area
Mhm.
and decided not to intervene with any of the protests or looting or that was going on. And you had that he and other people were invited there, said, "Hey, can you protect my property?"
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's how he got there. Like it wasn't like some like, say what you will about Rittenhouse sense. And I don't really have any issue with how he approached things. I mean, I think when you find yourself the center of a spectacle like that, it shapes how you see the world.
Yep.
It dramatically changes it.
And you can become the very thing that people were accusing you of becoming.
Yeah. So
So,
and I see this. It's a very similar thing with Aaron Rodgers. Now, like there was a big New York Times story about him today, and where they basically taking him down, beating him up. And I think Aaron had always been a little bit hostile to the media, but he became really hostile once he started being attacked for not taking the vaccine that could have killed him because he is allergic to part of the compound.
yeah, man, that like don't get me started on that whole thing because
Yeah.
and the way Jimmy Kimmel and the problem is though that he has to be careful with is that when you become embittered and defensive, it's easy for us to say because we haven't been attacked that way, but it turns you into a very bitter defensive, puts you in a bitter defensive posture very easily, and then that only gives your opponents more ammunition. You have to try really hard to come across as measured, and he doesn't always come across that way. I mean, he makes sensible points, I think, but he's just basically
Often.
shouting
Yeah.
into a void. Yeah, I mean, but but
Sure.
but but the sports media is so fucking, you know, aligned against him or any form of any light getting through their rhetoric that they're going to try to make him out to be a crazy person. Ditto for Kyrie. I sent you something else. Now,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Yeah.
speaking of
Ready to make that
trial, I don't know
transition?
if that's a huh? Yeah,
Ready to
I
make
was
that
going to ask.
transition?
Speaking
Yeah.
of trial,
Yeah. Give me one moment.
yeah.
Oh my God. Uh,
While we're on the subject of legal proceedings, that's a big
yes.
giant fucking hint.
Bum, 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 bum. There we go.
Well, I sent you something else.
Oh, the other one. Okay,
Yes.
I'll
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other
yeah.
one. Yeah, but let's talk OJ.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, so how old were you when the Simpson chase happened? This is 1993 or 4?
I believe it's 4 because Michael Jordan was not in the league anymore.
Mm.
It was the Rockets in I was watching the NBA finals um and I still remember to this day, clear as day, Bob Costas and Tom Brokaw talking about you know, um, OJ and Al Collins on the loose. It was one of the craziest things ever.
I
How old
saw
were
this.
you?
I
10 years,
was
10 years
20.
older, right?
Yeah, I was 21,
Yeah.
and I watched it. Like, I mean, the stats of the people who watched it, I was floored
It was
by.
insane. Yeah. Yeah. It was insane. It was a different era. Um, I it was I forget. Was it 70?
I thought it was higher than that, but this is what I wanted to ask you about because somebody who's kept up with media for your whole
Yeah.
life, I mean, this ushered in a whole new paradigm, basically, right? I mean, is that overstating it?
No, no. I think it changed the way that like that man it changed the way that trials were covered. It changed court TV emerged. My beloved soap operas went down in flames because of this.
You were
Um
into soap operas?
oh yeah. I grew up a soap opera fan.
I did not know that.
Yeah. My mom and grandma and sister were all obsessed with soaps, and I ended up watching soaps.
They're
So
easy to get into. They hook
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Even
yeah,
as a kid. Yeah.
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 So as a kid, I was watching the shows. Yeah. So
So
um,
innocent, right? That feels so innocent to think
yeah,
about that time, doesn't it?
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember my grandmother watched the Spanish ones on
yeah.
Telemundo, which is the Mexican network.
They're good.
Um, and she would watch them with my mom, and my grandmother would be like muttering things in Spanish to the TV. Sin vergüenza.
Yeah. Uh,
So Court TV took
yeah.
down the
In
soaps.
cable broadly. That was a pivotal moment in terms of cable viewership, where networks, because daytime ratings, not just soap operas, but daytime news, daytime talk shows, they were never the same. Never the same. It was a line of demarcation. O.J. Simpson,
Lay that out for us.
meaning
What wasn't the same?
meaning whether you were Jerry Springer or Phil Donahue at that time, Maury Povich, Oprah Winfrey, they
All those
were
shows big hits, right? All those
all
shows
big
are big.
hits.
Yeah.
Springer was not as big as it got. Springer hit its apex later. We're talking like 98, 99, after it went full trash TV.
I was gonna say, following this
Yeah.
shift, right? Like, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But Jenny Jones, those shows of that strike, Ricky Lake, those shows were were in full control of daytime TV along with soap operas. And they commanded a very, very strong audience. And after OJ, in that OJ trial, and everybody being exposed to this made for TV trial, at least it appeared that
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, all that stuff sort of fell to the wayside. And we ended up with this really lull period in soap operas. Not soap operas, but in terms of daytime TV broadly. Soaps, news, and talk shows. And we haven't recovered.
So are you saying then that this somehow triggered a change in people's appetites?
Yes, it speaks to what you were describing earlier about Joe Rogan.
Hmm. There was an appetite there that people didn't realize they had.
People didn't realize it. People also, this was it speaks to what ended the yellow journalism age as well. It's very similar in that we had a huge change in terms of technology. Cable went from being kind of spread to really widespread.
And then 24 hours news
Yeah.
became. So when did the 24-hour cable cycle really take off?
Well, it started with CNN in 1979, 1980, that
But
era.
when did
That
it take off?
I'd say uh early 90s,
Okay, so
around that
right
time.
around it coincides with
Yeah.
OJ.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then shortly after that, you had the launch of Fox and MSNBC. Um and um and you had the cable news audiences hit probably their apex right after OJ.
What did this awaken in these audiences? What were they looking for after this trial?
Something real.
But also like pork rinds, like
Yeah,
fatty and salty and
something
gross.
salacious. And I think that's why Jerry Springer, I mentioned him a little too quickly. When his show pivoted after this trial, in the years after this trial, it pivoted to this sort of salacious, I'm gonna run on stage and get naked. I'm going to have the Klan on to fight with the Black Panthers. I'm going to have I'm going to run on stage and throw my heel at the woman who's sleeping with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from a trailer park and I hate black people. And then they'd bring on black people to fight with the lady for the trailer park. I-
Well, and mostly a lot of times I saw on there it was like two chubby
yeah,
white women fighting over a man,
yeah,
sometimes black, if I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
right.
yeah. I
You
remember.
know, and like gesturing like real tough, like they were like street hood girls, but they were like,
Yeah,
white rural chicks, and discovering that, this child is his, and then the two women start fighting each other, and then the guy's sitting there with this like sheepish. What's funny is I thought that stuff was horrible at the time, but again, it feels there's something quaint about it almost now,
mhm,
right? Because
sure.
it's taken a turn for even the more horrific. Now what we can see via cell phone footage is more, it's like snuff films, basically, almost, not quite, but
Sure, all the time.
yeah.
For sure, all the time. We're always seeing something awful, something intense. And I think that's what part of what I think, not just OJ, I think Rodney King, you throw that into this scenario as well. This the first time that we've seen like sort of constant coverage, even if you throw in Desert Storm in the coverage of those events, where we're seeing the same image over and over and over and over again. And it fundamentally changed the way that news was covered.
Mm,
Also, this was toward the end of the period where news was a loss leader.
hmm.
Um, it used to be, hey, we have news on 60 Minutes that doesn't need to make money. The Today Show doesn't need to make money. It's nice if it makes money. Doesn't need to. And it got to this period where no, everybody's got to make money. We have to put on all this news has to make money.
Right, and then we have to fill 24 hours with it, and now we know people
Yeah,
want salacious,
yeah,
terrible stuff.
yeah.
When does the show Cops take off?
Oh, it was earlier.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
Late 80s.
okay, okay. But that kind of thing is what people want. It becomes increasingly clear. Yeah, I mean, I remember that feeling very suffocating. There's a song by the hip hop group Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, who I love. They have an album called Hypocrisy is the Greatest Luxury. That's Michael Franti before he was fronting Spearhead. And they have a song called Television, the Drug of a Nation, Breeding Ignorance. And he talks about Desert Storm being just being broadcast like a TV show,
Yeah.
which I thought was very profound. And this comes full circle to Jane's Addiction, because they have a song called Ted Just Admit It, that's a reference to Ted Bundy. but now the news is just another show, and I find that line so profound. This is 1988, by the way,
Yeah.
when they wrote that, but it's
Yeah.
still gives me the chills to think about that because it still rings so true. Sex is violence. Show me everybody naked and disfigured. Nothing shocking is the line from that song. And man, did that end up being true?
And that speaks to the other our previous conversation. Look, I do think that was a pivotal moment where news became entertainment, and I don't think we've looked back. And it was already as you were describing with Franti, and I could go back even further. I think of the old Mike Wallace. I'm going to show up at this shady business, and like and would do it in a dramatic way, and do the take out these shysters on TV kind of thing that they used to do in 60 Minutes. But I do think that was a moment where news crossed the Rubicon. It became entertainment first.
Mm. Now, wouldn't we say, though, in retrospect, or looking at our current moment and trying to read the tea leaves of where we're headed, yes, we have the proliferation of all these horrible things, or junk foody kind of bad for you kind of shit online, doom scrolling, blah blah. But are we not coming around to something more nutritious? I mean, there's lots of no.
No.
JP said nah.
I think we have more nutritious options, but for the masses, it's TikTok. It's an Instagram full of these short videos of just random girls doing weird shit.
Mm.
It's the OnlyFans world. It's I don't think in macro we are back to a more nutritious media environment.
No,
I
I don't
think
think we're healthy as a species in
yeah,
macro,
yeah, we're
but
definitely
there
not.
are
Mm.
things sprouting that I find encouraging.
Um yeah, look, I think there are some things that are sprouting that I find encouraging. I don't think that they are I don't think they'll ever dominate.
Mm. You think it's pissing in the wind, kind of?
Yeah. I think as I get back to the one of the other points I made earlier about technological changes, cable being one, the printing press and making newspapers being simple. I think what ends up where technology seems to going is more personalization,
Hmm.
and with more personalization comes more candy, not more nutritious
Mm.
output. Unless you demand it because you do have control of your algorithm. You can simply, have nutritious content. But, I like candy too.
Sure, who doesn't? You know who likes candy too is Mace and Cameron. They were about to give OJ a gig as an NFL weekly commentator. And I just thought their defense of it was so shitty. I don't like their show. I mean, obviously it's super successful and but as I always say, McDonald's and Hitler sold a lot too. Um I'm not comparing those guys to Hitler, obviously.
Yeah, I got
And I
you.
mean they're they're entertaining, but they defended it, but I felt like it was just like, why don't you just come out and say we'll just fucking do anything for $1?
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially it. I
You
mean,
know, it was just so. I mean, I think the outrage towards OJ is also a little bit um misguided.
hmm.
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I wasn't fucking there, but it seems obvious. The one thing that Whitlock pointed out that I've always thought is very perverse about him is that he never seemed contrite at all.
Yeah. He wrote a book. If I did
Right,
it,
right,
this is how
right.
it happened.
Right. And the same journalist who did the Spin ongoing AIDS investigation series, she did a piece on he basically, there's a really amazing story about how like he she interviewed him about it, and she didn't record his statement, and her editor said, no, that's fine, you can go with the statement anyway. And it was just like, man, this is not something somebody would say if they were innocent. I don't remember the exact quote. I don't want to quote it and fuck it up. But
Mhm.
I think people race to defend him to overcompensate for the fact that people are outraged because it's a black man killing a white woman. But
Mhm.
I also think the people who go ahead.
I do think that's certainly a large part of what made it such a maximum media story. It is a black man, one of the most famous black men in America for decades at that point. Remember, this
Mhm.
guy was a Heisman Trophy winner, I believe, in the late 60s.
And let's show him in his finest moment that I sent you the picture of.
Let me pull it back up. Yeah, like he was
This
he was a
classic
Heisman.
film. This classic film forever tarnished by OJ's indiscretions. This is
Yeah.
this is an American classic. Don't let OJ fuck it up for you. Don't let OJ take this away from us. I saw this in the theater, god damn it, and it was awesome.
Yeah. Look, I think this got to be a big camera one. I look, the biggest part of the appeal was it was a race war fight, and that's how it played out, and that's part of how the verdict happened the way it was. It's some of the worst arguments that I've heard for it, especially during that period of the summer of love that we talked about, and of course,
Mhm.
the George Floyd was that OJ was, and I believe it was an op-ed that OJ was the OJ verdict was the first salvo in the fight for social justice,
God.
and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like
See
this
that?
is.
That pisses me off. That pisses me off. But I also think that the outrage is also, it's okay. Like, he murdered somebody, that sucks, and kind of distance yourself from
Because
it. You don't have
murdering
to.
someone is bad.
I know. I get. No, I get it. I get it. I get that. And
Getting away
like
with murder is horrible.
right. And like I'm saying, I thought what Cameron and Mace were doing is disgusting in hiring him and like rehabilitating his pop culture image. But I don't want to fucking hear Doug Gottlieb on his high horse inveighing against OJ either. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, just we just call it for what it is. You know what I mean? You don't need to apologize, be an OJ apologist, but you don't need to lean into it either. Because how many murders happen all the fucking time? How many athletes have done shit that is, I mean, or resulted in killing people? Andy Reid's son got into a drunk driving accident and a child died. Okay, that to me, that's way fucking worse. And we don't hear shit about that.
Yeah, agreed.
So shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, Doug Gottlieb.
Well, I agree with part of that. Look. All right. Brutally murdering your wife and her friend,
Was he a friend?
or boyfriend. I don't know. I don't know that is better than the Andy Reid kid situation. I forget his name.
It's not
It,
intentional though, and it's obviously a drug addiction or an addiction, and he's
yeah,
not getting behind the wheel wanting to kill somebody. Right, right.
yeah.
I mean,
I both are terrible things.
and I don't like I
OJ's
think
worse.
it.
No,
I
no.
think it was
OJ,
healthy.
no. OJ is worse.
Yes, it's premeditated. I think one thing that was healthy is that OJ's image was not really just the public's memory wasn't short for a change, right? He didn't recover his celebrity, and these motherfuckers were about to put him back on and try to do that with him, which I thought was gross.
I don't think that would have done anything for his image publicly.
But they were selling it as this like fucking sideshow
Yeah,
attraction,
I know,
which I
but I
think
don't
is
think.
so gross.
Yeah, but I
Like,
don't think it would actually move the needle at all.
right, but the thing is, nothing else tried to do that with OJ. There's been people, right? Like
Mhm.
this is what irks the shit out of me with metal musicians in particular. They love like Charles Manson shit and like one of the guys from Korn bought a car that I think belonged. I forgot which serial killer it belonged to, but he bought a fucking car that belonged to this guy. And it's like, why would you want that? Like what kind of asshole like wants to even be around the energy of that? It's not fucking cool. Like murder is not like this is what Oliver Stone was addressing with Natural Born Killers. It's not an avenue to celebrity, right? We shouldn't take it casually. Um, and so I think society never really re-embraced OJ, and I think that was good. But I also think people, like he was a bad guy. It's like, look, the facts fucking speak for themselves. And that trial, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. I mean, what a monumental fuck up, huh? On the prosecution's part.
Yeah, like it was it was a very very bad decision. Um, very bad decision in the biggest spot possible. We're talking one of the biggest stories in American history, maybe the biggest, certainly one of the biggest media stories of American history.
And you're saying it could be the biggest because I remember when I asked you that afterwards, you
Certainly
said
one of them.
no.
One of them, not the biggest. One of them. I don't think it's even the biggest of the last quarter century.
What is your top 5 or 10? If you
Top
go
5 or
just
10?
off the top of your head, what are the biggest stories?
I'd go Trump presidency 2, 1 COVID. In the ballpark would be Princess Diana death, 9/11.
Kennedy
It would
assassination.
go well, American history or American
Or
history
yeah, 25
or
years. Let's just go our lifetime.
my lifetime. So I'm turning 40 next month. So I'll go back 40 years. So in the 1984.
Reagan
Uh,
getting shot. But was that even that?
no,
Because he didn't die.
no. Well, it was huge, but it was not. But it was. It's not. It's not in that 40-year period.
Hmm.
For me, at least.
Hmm.
Um, but but it was a big story. I think the Challenger was a
I was
bigger
gonna
story.
just gonna say that. I was just gonna say that.
Um, the Lewinsky investigation
Hmm.
and the whole
Yeah.
Clinton scandals of the 90s. Both in terms of your like mainstream media and your alternative media. Everything from Juanita Broderick, who is on Twitter throwing bombs all the time, to to the whole Vince Foster thing, to the to of course Monica, Ken Starr. Um, that was we're talking 6 years
Mm.
of one of the top 5 or 6 stories in America.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think that tops Trump or COVID. And I thought I thought for a while that as I sat with it, that maybe it was recency bias. But COVID's won. It's with a bullet.
Well, I mean, it's dominated there are more avenues of media now, and it's dominated
Not
all
just that, it dominated everything. Yes,
from every perspective
every
possible.
perspective. You can find them all. And it's dominated every element of our lives for
So I mean, but that's why I wouldn't put it number one because it's so extraordinary. It's like if the moon exploded
yeah.
and the world was,
That's why it's got to be number one, though.
but I mean,
But
that's
that's what made OJ so extraordinary. OJ's so extraordinary because you had a Heisman Trophy winner back then when winning the Heisman Trophy was like winning the Best Actor Oscar, Best Actor Emmy, national title in the Super Bowl all in one. That's what it was back then for him. He was, and then he goes on to be one of the biggest athletes of the 70s. And then he goes on to be a TV and movie star. And then he kills his wife. And then it becomes one of the biggest media stories on TV 24/7 for a couple years. Like, that's why it's hard to get him out of the number 3 hole. So prior to Donald Trump winning the presidency, he probably would have been number 1, even ahead of 9/11. And that's saying something.
Wow. Okay.
9/11 is certainly up there. It's in that top 5. But man, I mean, I'd say 9/11 is 4.
9/11, I don't think lasted as long in terms of
Yeah.
media coverage.
In the broader impact, you could argue that the whole war on terror that followed, you could probably wrap that in there, and certainly it keeps it in competitive. You know, I can make it 10 different arguments why it's number 1. You know, from
But it
Osama
also got absorbed into that.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't sustain our grip on that event for 2 fucking years.
And I would argue that whether it's Donald Trump or COVID, that it was a sustained grip. And even after Trump went away, it was like our media complex was begging him to come back.
Sure.
Because the ratings that came with him were crazy.
Yeah.
For Fox, for MSNBC, for everybody. So, yeah. And Princess Di may be 5th. Her death, you could argue her whole, like, from the marriage to Charles to the death, because she was a draw in newspapers, she was a draw in magazines and tabloids, she was a draw on TV. And you know, I just remember Keith Olbermann. This was on his first stint at MSNBC. He was talking about how, like, when Di came on, it was Princess Di 24/7. And then even after, like, stuff started to fade a little bit, they'd just repeat yesterday's news about Princess Di. Right? Like, it was that
strange
thing.
That's so strange, especially for American viewers.
But the Brits and the British throne is so captivating to a cohort of American news watchers, mostly women.
My grandmother and mom watched the wedding. I remember being a kid and watching it with them.
And that's the biggest part, right? You had this fairy tale wedding that ends in a divorce. And then she's trying to reclaim her life. And then it ends in tragedy. And I can even see the smashed up car I believe I was watching NBC News on a Saturday night. All right.
Shows you how
yeah,
eventful your life was at the time.
Well, what, I was like, I don't know, 14 or something.
Oh,
15.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I think I was watching one of their Saturday night shows, and they broke in, and it was Princess Diana's dead in Paris. So, I I'd say that she probably her life and death is probably fifth,
Hmm.
but that's my list. Um, um, but OJ's third. What's yours?
I don't know. I mean, I can't think of anything else. I wonder where Columbine would be on that, but that doesn't,
Uh,
that's more
it
of a
will be in
lingering,
between somewhere.
yeah,
It's far back.
it's more of a lingering effect than it is the actual, I mean, the memory of the event itself
Yeah.
certainly still reverberates.
Well, school shootings as a meme, you could argue that like you could probably lump them together as sort of a concept uh that it's just been a massive story up to like Uvalde
Hmm.
last
Hmm.
year. Was that last year or the year before?
Oh, it was the year
Year before,
before. I think it was 2022.
2022.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Um, yeah, so like you could argue, I could argue, I could lump them together and probably make a case for it being in the top 10.
Yeah, but I like, I would, my only gripe is I would take COVID and put that at 0 because it's like it's so huge, it impacted the entire planet. Of course, it's going to be covered. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like so, I don't know.
You'd make it the COVID memorial list.
I mean, it's like, how could you not
Yeah.
cover that? It's so gigantic that it's not, it's more than just a media story.
All
It's like
right.
the central preoccupation. But I mean, you're right. It is in the number one position. I just would put an asterisk by it because
All
what
right.
else were we gonna do?
Well,
Were we not gonna talk about it?
well, I'd say in American news, number 6. Um, if COVID is off the board, if it's the COVID memorial biggest media stories of all time list,
Right. Exactly. That's a good way to, yeah.
um, could
Tony
be Barack
Fauci.
Obama.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. I
Barack
mean,
Obama
yes.
would have an argument getting
Yeah. I mean,
elected.
and also the relentless.
Really, from the moment he gave that speech at the Democratic convention through the
Hmm.
election, even if you leave out the rest of the presidency, just as a media story,
Mhm.
this sort of like first black president, you certainly could make a very strong argument for Barack Obama at number 5.
Hmm.
I don't think Barack Obama gets above there though. And if you told me that a couple years ago or a decade ago, I I would have been shocked.
Hmm.
But I because I think I could have made a pretty strong argument for it to be top 2, maybe number 1. But no, I just this last few years has been so well, you know, oh no, it's not in the top 5.
Well, Taylor Swift is on pace if this continues.
Not no.
Okay.
Up there,
Okay.
top 10,
Okay.
top 10.
Who's in number 5 instead of Obama?
And by the way, Michael Jackson,
Mm.
from during that period, his life and death certainly warrants in that ballpark. But there's one really obvious one, and I mentioned him earlier.
Give me a hint.
Summer of Love, baby.
Oh, George Floyd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, George Floyd would be number 5. So number
Yeah.
5, George Floyd. Um, number 4, can't believe I'm about to say it. Number 4 is 9/11. Number 3,
Is OJ.
OJ.
And 2 is Trump, and 1 is or well, oh yeah, right. We're bumping.
Yeah. So if it's COVID,
2
it's
is
Trump,
Princess Di. Right. Trump.
OJ, Princess Di,
9/11.
9/11, and I could argue 9/11 over Princess Di. You could go either way. They're about
Okay.
tied.
Okay. And then George
And
Floyd.
Floyd.
So 3 of the top 5 are the last few years.
It's been an insane. It's one of the craziest news stretches in the history of America.
Hmm.
And you think it's recency bias? At least that's where my head usually goes with this kind of thing. But no, it's like this has been nuts.
You can track it, you're saying. The analytics will show.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, don't worry, America, because NPR is on the case.
Yeah. And thank you for the 2 people who are still with us. Holy shit.
You must have fallen asleep. You must have fallen asleep.
So you want to call this one and reconvene?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And we'll talk Tucker and Joe Rogan
As-
another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. Thanks for quizzing me. And we'll do this again.
Absolutely.
Peace, everybody.